G'day, legends. Happy Saturday, and I hope that you're having, so far, a fantastic weekend. Now, today, as always, we have a lot to go over. We need to look at some drone attacks against fighter aircraft. As well, we'll talk a little bit extra about fighter aircraft and some claims in other areas. We need to talk about missiles and something we spoke about maybe a few months ago about some missiles maybe getting upgraded and laser designating targets from drones of missiles. We'll look at the maps, and then we need to talk about shells and the amount that North Korea potentially may be sending to Russia and the amount that Europe is saying that they're going to develop for Ukraine next year and to refill then their own stocks. Now, of course, currently, this weekend, the big news in this war going on is the peace conference happening in Lucerne in Switzerland at a luxury resort. Now, as we know, China's not there, Russia's not there, Biden's not there, Kamala Harris is stepping in for Biden. What will come of this? Well, it's just post the G7 summit. We know Ukraine got a lot of promises and proposals at then the G7 summit for security guarantees and this and that, and billions of dollars. A lot of that coming from then the frozen Russian assets. And then it comes into this to then convince other countries to maintain or increase support to Ukraine. But as far as will we see peace come out of this summit? No, because peace in this war, from the goals set by Ukraine and the goals set by Russia, are reliant on military victory. For Ukraine, pushing through to the 1991 border. For Russia, pushing through and then getting the oblasts of Donetsk, Zap, Kherson, Luhansk, at a minimum, I would say, for what they've set as their goals, and forcing Ukraine's hand for some sort of negotiation. Now, as you'll be aware, Russia's President Vladimir Putin put forward a peace proposal yesterday, a day before then the peace conference happening in Switzerland, to throw a spanner into the works. And this Twitter exchange here, I think, sums it up perfectly. Now, if you want to see my full breakdown, the video before this one talks exactly on that. This guy says Russian forces don't occupy 40% of Donetsk, 25% of Zap, 25% of Kherson, and 1% of Luhansk. So what Putin's proposal was Ukraine withdraw, you don't join NATO, and you lift the sanctions on us. We will take the Kherson Oblast, we'll take the remainder of Zap, Donetsk, Luhansk, but the war will end and we'll let you withdraw out of here, but for a full end to the war. Now, of course, Ukraine was never going to accept it. But on the flip side of this, and of course, Russia doesn't occupy all of those areas, but this guy says this, well, Zelensky does expect Putin to abandon whatever percentage he does occupy. And this is the diplomatic negotiating graveyard that we're in, is Putin is expecting then Zelensky to give up areas of which are not occupied. But on the flip side, Zelensky is expecting Putin to give up areas of which then are occupied. And I think that exchange summed that then up well. But I got some feedback from the video yesterday from one of my guys, very knowledgeable, and I thought I'd just read this and begin with this. Bro, I saw your last video on the latest Russian sanctions. It was good. The only thing I'd add is these sanctions are going to affect Russia's economy, as companies in Russia will still need to access the US dollars, as the yuan is not a reliable means of exchange. This means that companies will have to pay more to trade in US dollars, thereby increasing the costs of Russian goods in import and export markets. By contrast, if the Ukrainian economy was the Titanic, we have well and truly hit the iceberg. The lights on the dash are flashing red and some are going out, all while the G7 debates what colour the captain's hat should be. You hit a nail on the head regarding the energy crisis. Most production has been hit hard, and the Russians are starting to hit the grid at large. In response, the government has told businesses that they must produce or purchase 80% of their energy. The damage this will do to the economy will be immense. The cost of all Ukrainian exports is going up. Only the businesses that are self-sufficient or connected to the government will survive. Ukraine is facing not just an ongoing recession, but an impending wave of unemployment. This has already affected steel workers and the Kyiv metro. So like we spoke about yesterday, with Russia hitting the energy grid very hard, and what DTEC has said is it's going to get worse before it gets better heading into winter, and then the critical infrastructure that also relies on that, such as sewage and hospitals and other areas too, then there's going to be a huge shortage. And as well, everything running then on generators then could have a fuel problem as well, or at frontline areas create more of a thermal signature. So that is a large problem with the electricity grid there, and as well as affects the economy, what can affect then people leaving the country and attitudes and morale and all of this. So interesting to think about, and I always like to get some criticism on and feedback on what I have done, rather than just call me a knob like the majority of people. Now, let's have a quick talk about shells, and then we'll look at some geolocated footage of fighters and this and that, as I believe this is fairly major. So then Seoul has said Kim Jong-un sent Russia millions of artillery shells from South Korea. Of course, Kim is North Korean. Has sent containers to Russia that could hold nearly 5 million artillery shells. We don't know exactly what is in then those containers. Shin Won-sik said in an interview with Bloomberg News that Seoul has detected at least 10,000 shipping containers being sent from North Korea to Russia, which could hold as many as 4.8 million artillery shells of the likes that Putin has used in his bombardment of Ukraine. That is a hell of a lot of shells. Remember, the 2023 promise of shells to Ukraine was 1 million shells, that we only managed in the West to provide about half of that number, what of course led to the shell shortage that Ukraine is still recovering from, but mostly in the beginning of 2022. And we haven't seen that Czech shell initiative really come into play yet, as I can't remember the amount, but it was a huge amount of them needed extra work as they weren't in operating condition. Now, this continues here. The 10,000 containers being shipped from North Korea to Russia. Pyongyang also sent dozens of ballistic missiles that Moscow troops launch against Ukraine, with evidence that some have been fired before. In exchange, and this is where I think the concern should be, is what's going back the other way. Russia reportedly provided North Korea with technology to help it deploy spy satellites as well as tanks and aircraft. So, of course, Russia has a lot more modern tanks, a lot more modern aircraft, and a lot more modern technology as far as satellites, communications, and what pops into a lot of people's brain is something with a large bang, of course, that North Korea has been trying to develop for a long time. I think Iran, we need to look at that too. Russian President Vladimir Putin will reportedly visit Vietnam and North Korea soon. He will probably want to receive more shells during the trip and seek to strengthen security cooperation with Pyongyang. So it is very interesting, and they're saying are from the 1970s. That said, we know that these countries can produce a hell of a lot of dumb weapons, especially with trade being so much cheaper and labour being so much cheaper. Just to produce mass of equipment, it is there. And that is one of the things holding back just producing massive amounts of equipment is our own privatisation of the military industrial complex. Of course, this employs many people. You have great technology, all of this, but it means everything becomes very expensive, and people trying to win then defence contracts, they try and up the technology to look better on paper, but it may, if it gets jammed, just be a expensive weapon that you have fewer of, rather than just a heap of dumb bombs. The European Union has accelerated the production of shells, and over the next year, it will come up with Russia in production capacity. Breton noted, by the end of the year, the EU plans to reach the level of 1.7 million shells per year, and in 2025, reach Russia's capacity of 2.5 million shells per year. So still talking 18 months away if it's reached. We have accelerated production of ammunition in March 23. We were producing 500,000 shells per year in Europe and are already better than the Americans, who are producing 300,000. Now, like I've said a million times, we are lucky that we found out this issue in this war rather than a wider war, because if this wasn't just two countries going out at isolated, imagine how quickly we would have completely just run out of shells. Now, I know people like tanks and they like fighter aircraft and they like pissing in the wind. The most amount of casualties are being produced from shells. Artillery is still the king on the battlefield. This need is shared by many EU member states and can benefit our defence industry, but it must be able to supply weapons to the European army on time. So not only to Ukraine, but also backfill the amount that Europe has also sent to Ukraine out of its reserves. And artillery is going to be a huge problem leading further and further down the line on this war. How can Russia continue to produce them? Can Iran and North Korea continue that production to Russia to keep capacity? And can we keep the capacity to Ukraine as well? Now, just reaching parity on those is still an issue when Ukraine is going to have to launch an offensive at some point, and part of that is going to have to be overmatch of artillery, and of course, not only in range, accuracy, distance, but also just in the sheer amount of it. Now, let's have a look at a few fighter aircraft that have been reportedly damaged and or destroyed, depending who you listen to. But there's been 2 strikes reported on the strikes yesterday on the Telegram, but we didn't know what the damage outcome was. So 2 strikes. One, this airfield down here, this is within Russia. Let's zoom right out here. Of course, this is Ukraine. So on the airfield down here, as well as then a substation then here. Let's show you the substation first. These images and stuff are from Brady Afric. This is the substation on June the 4th. And then substation then on June the 14th. You can see then the burned area here hitting that electricity grid. My father works for an electricity company, but I don't know how much damage that would actually cause. Then we come down then to the airfield, and this is where then the main damage taking place, trending over Twitter has taken place. So let's have a look at then this. So we see here on June the 4th, then 5 Su-34 aircraft sitting out in the open here. Then we skip forward to today, so yesterday, June 14th. We then see what looks to be burn or spill marks here. Unsure, that wasn't there before, but it looks like almost something spilt from here. We're not sure. And then we see this roof here has been blown off, and it does appear that there are 2 Su-34s within then where this roof has been. So this is the before, this is the after. So it does appear that the 2 aircraft have been moved into cover here, and that roof has been blown off, and you can see the debris from that roof there. Now, how much damage has been caused here? This photo doesn't tell us anything. People are saying they're likely destroyed. People are saying they're likely fine. We cannot tell from this aircraft. This spill burn mark here, that's interesting as well, but it looks like whatever was here, whatever this thing is, whether it was fuel or oil or something, has been hit. But yeah, we don't know, but people are claiming that they are destroyed here. Now, we do have a couple more photos and fighter bomber as well, but I want to look at this because Kirill Budanov has said as well that more than 70 Ukrainian drones were part of the latest attack on the airbase. So one thing with this is, okay, 70 took place. We've had a couple of hits as well as the hit on the substation. So everyone says like Russia's interception of drones can't hit them, blah, blah, blah. Well, what I'll say to this is, well, it does look like the majority of those drones were intercepted by EW, SPAG, or some level of AD. So yeah, but it does show some hits. But if 70 hit, this would look significantly different. So there is definitely some interception there. The base will be attacked again, as he has promised. So very interesting to see that at that base. Now we have another photograph here showing what some are saying are burn marks, and also some others are saying is oil on the tarmac and where things are dirty from leftover. Again, nothing is like completely definite here that there was completely destroyed aircraft. Now, one thing I will say with these drones move very slow in the air. It can be hard to hit them, but they do move relatively slow. So the ability to move aircraft on the ground or get them up in the air, which is the safest spot against a drone, is there as well, that it's not there, say, on a ballistic weapon system. So again, the level of damage here, not actually sure. What does this definitely tell us? Well, it definitely tells us a number of drones came in and all the aircraft have basically then bloody moved from here, bar a couple sitting around. So we know there's been some strikes. The damage of those, we don't know. Fighter bomber has then said this: the airfield was empty. There were no planes there for breaking the roof. Of course, you'll get pussy. So breaking the roof, that there's something in there maybe under maintenance. Timely recovery from attack is the key to entire aircraft removal from attack. Is only effective method of rescuing aircraft in the absence of reinforced concrete structures. So saying if you don't have reinforced concrete structures over the aircraft, what you have to do is get the aircraft away from that airfield. Now, of course, with the amount of electronic warfare, a lot of these drones will be preset to strike an area. So imagine there was an aircraft here. It's probably hit the same spot, even if the aircraft has gone or not. We're not exactly sure how all the targeting has worked. Now, I can't find the footage, but yesterday floating around, there was footage in Russia of an industrial facility on fire, said to be UAC. Now, UAC build things like the Su-34, Su-57, these type of aircraft. Now, UAC on Telegram has then said this: over the course of the night and morning, many incorrect reports came out about an alleged fire on the territory of Sukhoi Design Bureau. In this regard, we inform you there was no fire on the territory of the Sukhoi Design Bureau. The fire broke out in the adjacent territory of this plant. There is no production activity in the area where the fire occurred. It has long been moved from the other sites. The Sukhoi Design Bureau is, and will be present, not the former, as unfortunately some authors of nightly publications stated. Work is proceeding as usual. New equipment needed by the country is being created. So again, not 100% sure there. When Bismarck said, if you want something confirmed, wait for it to be officially denied. Regardless. Now, let's have a quick look over then the maps. Of course, we have Ukraine, the center, the capital of Kyiv, red areas occupied since 2022, the purple since 2014, and of course, the green areas where Russia has been and has either withdrawn out of, although there's still, I check this every couple of days, this up in here still should have just at least a little bit of green where the Russians actually did cross over more recently, but doesn't yet show it. Now, no changes up in Volchansk, no changes up in the north. The first changes we start seeing on this map are in Bakhmut, just in here. Now, this area, we have said previously that likely this has been unoccupied by Ukraine anyway, just due to where it sat in here for a long time. That'd be a hell of a long way in to be still having forces, but we know that there's definitely been an increase around Chasiv Yar. Then we'll pull down into then Avdiivka. Now, this, of course, is the Urmansk-Netelyove front, that this is closing up in this gap by the Russian forces, as well as closing up this other envelopment out of Novopokrovsky as well, out from the west of Semenivka, just as we have seen these envelopments taking place and sort of what we have said. And we're seeing this updated on this map. Of course, then we don't have a what's it called, Syriac map update in here. Hopefully we will get one then soon. So let's have a look down on this southern one here. Now, this is Urmansky just here. It can be difficult to see. So Urmansk here, and then above this showing more of a fill-in gap above Urmansk right across in this region. So again, see this road? This is said road right here. That Noel Reports' map is showing that this in here is getting filled in by the Russians, which is what we would expect when you actually have a look at this and go, well, would there be defensive work sitting well back in here? The issue is here is the lines of defense that were built here since Avdiivka. Remember, this has been on the front line for now 10 years, that those defensive works fell and multiple other areas have fallen back in here as this grinds forward towards then Pokrovsk and other open areas which could collapse quickly. Now, Rybar has put out a weekly update on then the Avdiivka direction, and this lines up similar to what we're seeing if we combine this with then the Noel Reports map. So this is the Urmansk front down the bottom here, and we see the closing up. And by June 13th, it looks very similar to what we're seeing on then the Noel Reports, and no real change up in Novopokrovsky. Novopokrovsky as far as the break-in as well. Rybar is reporting very similar, as well as some other fronts coming out, which is no different to what we're seeing amongst a lot of the maps in here. Some may come earlier, some may come later as things drip feed in, but regardless, still looks fairly similar. Now, let's look at some strikes and some things we've spoken about previously too. Now, we know there was mass missile strikes again towards Ukraine last night. Now, we'll talk about where they're heading, but it's no shock. Now, shot down, Ukraine is claiming 7 of 10, 0 of the Iskander, 0 of the KH-47 air ballistics, and all of the Shahed drones. So, not intercepting a lot of these types here. Now, what we always ask is, well, if they're not intercepted, did they hit the targets? Of course, we don't get the satellite imagery over Ukraine, and we don't get anything off the front because Ukraine has got it absolutely locked down of anything on these strikes. But what we can see is this Khmelnytsky, they're all going for that airbase. Now, that airbase is most likely the place where we would see those F-16s come, and most likely the area that has been built up to then receive them. Obviously, if Russia's going to send multi-millions of dollars worth of weapon systems. They're not going to send it into just the abyss. Even if it gets struck, taken down, EW hits and it misses, the overall location of where it's going, they must have some intel on what is then here or trying to destroy build up of that before those better aircraft come in. So that's interesting to see. Now, down, said to be here, so just to the east of Zap. So, of course, if we look at where Kopani, Robotny, these areas, so you can get an idea of where we actually are, there we have seen video claimed to then be from an Iskander, so a Russian Iskander, against a M270, so aka a HIMARS system, could be firing HIMARS or Iskanders. What we don't see here is really clear secondaries cooking off that we typically would see with a system like this. So again, some are saying it's empty, some are saying it was a decoy, some are saying it's legit. Again, we don't know. I'll just show you on here. But what we are seeing is these drones operating a fair while behind the line and potentially laser designating these in. Now, that's an Iskander. We've talked about, could the Tornado more be laser designated? And we spoke about this before, and a guy has said to me, the Granite 4 laser designating targets, just as we suspected, because we have seen some of those weapon systems, their kill chain between time of scene to time of hit has shortened a lot, and it's like, is something designating here? And one of my guys, and we've read this before, did reach out and said, a few weeks ago, stumbled upon Tornado S ammunition circuitry video. Notice the circuit had too many jumper wires. And this is something you typically don't want, but there's no reason for these. This makes me think a modification to the circuitry is made last minute. Remember, this guy's a PhD in engineering. But plausible that the Russian engineers have MacGyvered an extra sensor to make the missile laser guided. The hardest part of such modification would be bureaucracy. These systems could be tested properly before handing them over to troops, but in wartime, Russians might have pipelined their testing grounds into combat fields. Something we've seen. We've seen many weapons being tested by Ukraine and Russia on the front lines that are still in testing phases in other areas around the world. The video is referring to is this one if you'd like to go and have a look for yourself. So I'm no PhD in engineering, but could that be happening? Well, we speculated on this a few months ago when we saw a lot of those strikes against choppers and stuff of typically GLONASS GPS-guided weapons of set, forget, go. And we're going, well, there's a drone. Why then would a drone be in place other than for PR reasons? Could it be laser designating on some of these weapons? Could that be then upgraded, put on there? And the guy said to me in the last part of the email, I don't think I have it there, if he's like, if you just take away your biases, could Russian engineers do this? Yes, absolutely, it could then happen. Is it happening? Well, that's up to us to speculate. Legends. Shorter one today, but I hope you're doing well. Look after yourself, and I'll speak to you tomorrow. Thank you. Bye-bye.